Bilingual people. What is a thing that non-bilingual will never understand? 1. The fact that I no longer translate in my head when I use my second language. The fact that I can be unaware which language I am reading. I have a bit of a stutter in one language but not the other. Jokes that work in both languages are the funniest. 2. Literal translations rarely work. A lot of monolingual people seem to think other languages are like their language, but with other words, and every word is an equivalent. 3. I often don't remember whether something was in English or Spanish. Especially if it was a conversation with bilingual friends, I can tell you what they said, but not what language it was said in. 4. Having an accent regardless of which language you're speaking. Yes, I have lived in the US for a very long time before traveling back to my country of birth. I was shocked when my old friends told me at our reunion that I had an accent when I spoke my native language. The accent disappeared after several days of me being in the environment where I only used my native language, but it was a shocking realization to me that I had an accent in the language that was native to me. 5. How near impossible it is to translate words when there is only one word for something in one language, but multiple variants of it in another. For instance, the word cousin in English is just cousin, but there are 8 different words for cousin in Chinese, all extremely specific. Older Malay on maternal side, older female on maternal side, younger Malay on maternal side, younger female on maternal side, older Malay on paternal side, older female on paternal side, younger Malay on paternal side, and younger female on paternal side. There is no general cover-all term for cousin. So when an English speaker says, "I was having dinner with my cousin last week," how do you translate that into Chinese for a Chinese audience without knowing which of the 8 cousin categories it falls into? It creates a 404 error. Cannot compute in the interpreter's brain. If you are ever giving a speech in English to a Chinese audience and want to see a look of crazed terror on your interpreter's face, just use the word cousin and watch the panic and despair unfold. Source: was an interpreter. 6. That the way language is constructed is not straightforward. It's not just a different set of words and rules of grammar. It's kind of a whole different way of processing thoughts into speech. 7. Forgetting words from your native language if you are using the second language too much. I have lost count of how many times I knew what I wanted to say in any other language, yet I forgot how to say it on my own native language. I end up remembering them later on anyways, but it is such an embarrassing feeling. Edit. Also, another little thing. Accidentally switching languages in the middle of a conversation. I may be talking to someone in English, and when I didn't understand something, I would be like, "Caray, what?" in Spanish, all without even thinking about what I did until I realized that I spoke in Spanish by mistake. It's not really common for it to happen, but I do remember each and every single time it does. 8. Speaking 2 languages at the same time. Usually because you forget certain words in one language, but remember it in the other, or because a word is easier to say. What the fuck you're talking about? I had a weird kind of version of this. I had taken French for several years, as had my roommate in college, so we used French in the dorm to help maintain our ability to use it. But I later took Mandarin as an elective, and during an oral exam, I realized my teacher was looking at me with a very confused expression. I had switched to French during the exam, and while she spoke both Mandarin and English, she didn't understand a word of French. My brain had just switched to French because non-English was kind of jumbled up together, and I was way more comfortable in French. 9. You have different personalities based on the language you're currently speaking, and your native language has emotional ties that aren't always present in other spoken languages. 10. Forgetting a word in every language that you know, lol. 11. When you want to say something you have the precise expression for, in another language than the one you're just speaking in. 12. How much fun it is. So I speak Dutch as a native language. My English is really good. My German is normal, and I also speak a bit of Swiss German. Believe me, that's a big difference. So a friend of mine is from Switzerland. She also speaks all those languages, and even more. When we are talking, I ask something in Dutch, she answers in English, and I reply in German. When we have a couple of beers, the language can change mid-sentence. We already had a couple of times people asking which language we were speaking. So yeah, that's quite fun. 13. Watching or reading something, a film, series or book, in its original language is just much better. 14. Empathy for non-native speakers trying to learn your language. 15. The sheer smug joy of other people not realizing you speak a second language. Having them speak rudely about you in that language, and then the look on their face as you respond to them in that language. I'm Canadian and come from a very English background with a very English name, and no trace of an accent, but can speak French and a bit of Italian. Work in customer service jobs, the amount of people who live off in French is too high to count at this point. That moment of realization, when I complete a transaction in French after they have been shit-talking me, is great. 16. That languages are lazy. I am a polyglot from a family of polyglots. No matter what the conversation is and whatever mishmash of words from whatever languages we are speaking, we always default to the easiest way to say something in a language. So we can be busting through a mix of French, German, and Polish, but the word for why will always be in English no matter what. Because in the other three languages it's at least 2 syllables and in Polish it's 3. If you want to see real-time how languages evolve, just sit at a table with polyglots as they hash out what they want to say. It's the idea of this is what humanity from XX region will sound like in XX years from intermingling sort of thing. 17. Trying to communicate while drunk and instead spouting a bastard chimera sentence that is words from 3 languages, but the grammar of none. 18. You are more comfortable arguing in one language than the other, and involuntarily shift to that language mid-argument. So true. I used to be able to argue only in German, but after living in other countries for over a decade I start the argument in German, then switch to English when I'm emotional, and end up swearing in Dutch when I'm mad. 19. How racist everyone is when they think you can't understand them. 20. Bilingual texting can be difficult, especially on iPhones. I'll be texting in Spanish, but autocorrect will assume I'm wanting to text in English and change everything, even if I'm using the Spanish keyboard and vice versa. 21. My German teacher, UK, but she was from Germany, took us on a trip to Germany, and one evening the waiter was speaking in German and she was speaking back in English. He clearly couldn't understand her, asked her to speak German, and she said back to him in English, I am speaking German. She just couldn't hear the English. 22. Professor here had a student who had significant problems with authority. Basically, he would curse out just about anyone who tried to instruct him on how to handle each name in the book. He started cursing in Spanish one day to avoid repercussions, and he described me as being roughly equal to a wrinkled ball bag. To cut a long tale short, I replied in fluent Spanish that he was going to call his mother and repeat what he had just said, and I would pay to get a picture of his face. 23. That when you use 3 languages on a daily basis, your brain sometimes gets confused, and you say some nonsense like a sentence with words from 2 languages, but formed with the grammar rules of the 3rd. This happens a lot when you're really tired and your brain is on low battery mode. 24. Getting stuck in one language when you get too emotional. For example, my French-speaking dentist scared me once with the anesthesia needle. I'm scared of needles, like many people, and I got stuck in English, panicking because he scared me, but also so embarrassed I couldn't switch back to French. He was obviously amused and spoke English too, so it was fine. It took me like 30 minutes to be able to switch back to French. 25. My favorite. When I speak English, it's fluent. When I speak my native language, it's fluent. When I speak my native language but insert an English word, it comes out with an accent. 26. At some point, if you're in the flow, your brain stops differentiating between the 2, or more, languages and just labels it language. Had this happen on a family trip to Japan, where half of us spoke the language and half didn't. Sometimes we'd be having a discussion with a group of Japanese people, in Japanese, where we'd decide to go to a second location or something, and we'd forget to inform the non-speakers because they were right there. How could they not hear what the plan was? Lol. Felt so bad for my husband and sister-in-law when we'd get up to leave and they'd just look at us like, so, what's going on? Didn't mean to be rude. Just didn't register like it should have.